You're listening to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is suitable for all audiences.
Paxton for three! Yeah! Yeah!
In 1993, when Chicago Bulls guard John Paxson sunk the series-winning shot in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Mark Schanowski was there reporting. In 1988, when Michael Jordan beat Dominique Wilkins in what is considered the greatest, most controversial slam dunk duel of all time, David Schuster was there reporting.
What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into your career?
In 2010, when Derrick Rose said,
"Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?"
It was Mark Schanowski who asked the question.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2010-2011 NBA Most Valuable Player Award to Derrick Rose of the Chicago Bulls.
In 2011, when Rose accepted the Most Valuable Player award to become the youngest MVP in the history of the league, David Schuster was there reporting. Schanowski, Schuster, two of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters. This is Sharpshooters.
Welcome into another edition of Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster, and he, of course, is Mark Schanowski. And coming up in just a little bit, the best Bulls beat reporter in the city. And, of course, we're talking about Casey Johnson of NBC Sports Chicago. But, Mark, since we last talked, the Bulls did not get the number 7 pick. It's not as rosy, though, as what we all thought. I mean, moving up to number 4 is better than 7. However, I'll let you finish the sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching the draft lottery live, and I heard that Bulls have jumped up. You know, 2 teams jump when the Knicks fell to 8, and the Knicks are another disaster as always. But, you know, you're thinking, that's great. You know, they got this opportunity. Even though it's not a strong draft, if they get one of the top 3 picks, they're guaranteed to get one of the elite top-tier guys. So I'm thinking as they go to commercial, and I'm thinking, well, it doesn't matter if they get the first pick. Actually, you probably don't want the first pick because it's a higher cap hit and there's not a clear-cut number 1. So you get 2, you get 3, that's great. I'm thinking anything but 4 would be fantastic. Of course, the first card they pull out, and the 4th pick goes to the Chicago Bulls. And, you know, now in a normal draft, moving up from 7 to 4 would cost you a lot. So there is value in moving up. It does create some trade possibilities that maybe didn't exist before, but clearly the top 3 players in the draft: James Wiseman, the center from Memphis; LaMelo Ball, the point guard, of course, who's moved all over the world playing, you know, wherever his dad wanted to play; and Edwards from Georgia, the shooting guard. So those 3 guys will go off the board in some order. And for AK and Mark Eversley and the scouting staff, they're going to have to pore over all the tape of these guys and go, who is the best guy that has star potential? Because AK said it numerous times in his press conference, he's looking for the best talent available. He's not worried about filling a positional need at 4.
We're going to hear from Arturas Karnisovas in just a second, but let's go over the scenarios, because right now Minnesota's 1, Golden State is 2, Charlotte's 3, and then come the Bulls. If you had to take an educated guess, and a lot of things can change between now and what's the draft, somewhere in October?
Right now it's October 16th, but there's a lot of talk they're going to move it back.
Okay, so Minnesota's number 1. They already have a center, and a really good one in Karl Anthony Towns. So I don't see them taking Wiseman.
No, I'll take Edwards.
Okay, so they take Edwards, and he's probably the surest bet, I guess. No? Okay.
You know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Dion Waiters. Kind of stocky.
He's a disruptor?
Well, I don't know. I'm not talking about off the court. I'm just saying on the court, he's a guy that takes bad shots that everyone thought coming in. You know, he was the 4th pick in the draft, Dion Waiters, when he came out, and people thought he was going to be this electric shooting guard that was going to light people up. Or you could say maybe, you know, the guy that the Minnesota had with Wiggins. You know, another guy that was thought to be this elite talent who's going to be a 20-plus per game scorer in the NBA. And then they come in, and sometimes they'll get those 20, but they won't do it very efficiently.
All right, I'm laughing to myself because I'm already looking ahead towards the number 3 pick, and I'm laughing because I think you know the possibility of what could happen at number 3. But Golden State is number 2. They're not going to pass up on Wiseman. I know he doesn't really fit into their current style of play, if you will, especially since they're so guard-oriented, but you don't pass up a big man at 7'1" who's got the potential that he does. So I think he ends up there.
The thing to watch with Golden State, though, is they're trying to win a championship next season. And Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are both on the wrong side of 30. So they may look to package that number 2 pick with Wiggins Maybe you go out and get an Al Horford because Philly's going to blow that thing up. I don't know if I'd give the 2 pick for Horford at this stage of his career.
No, I wouldn't.
But, they may look for a veteran. If they can get a veteran and just move down a few spots in the draft, that might be something they do because they want to win the title next year when Steph and Clay are still in their peak.
All right, so wouldn't Charlotte then at that point say, hey, let's make a trade because we don't want to get stuck with LaMelo Ball because then Daddy's coming. But the juicy scenario is then LeVar Ball and Michael Jordan are on the same thing. Well, at least you'd have the one-on-one that we've been talking about now for the last year or two. Well, I beat Michael Jordan. No, you didn't.
When you think about what is on that Charlotte roster, they've got some okay players. The backcourt of Rozier and Devontae Graham, and they got a good value pick last year in P.J. Washington, the power forward from Kentucky, who had a really nice rookie year. But they need somebody who can bring people out. Now, obviously, we want to get fans in the stands. We don't know when that's going to happen. We hope it is at the start of next season. Charlotte is one of those franchises. They don't have any exciting players, and they need to get somebody who can sell tickets, who can help them boost their TV ratings. And Michael Jordan, above all, is a businessman. I think if LaMelo Ball falls to 3, he'll go to Charlotte.
And then what happens? Because Daddy and Michael Jordan are not going to hit it off. We're talking about his father, LaMelo Ball's father, is LeVar Ball.
LeVar Ball, yeah.
What would come on? It's so juicy. It's a Saturday Night Live segment waiting to happen.
Well, we've seen Michael sitting on the courtside seats, along the baseline, going crazy at games at times. He kind of scaled back from that last year. He wasn't out there as much, but LaMelo Ball with taking pull-up 40-footers and the no-look passes that sail into the front row, that's going to drive Michael crazy. He wants winning players, and that's the one criticism of Ball. Well, there's a lot actually. His shot selection, the fact that he doesn't play any defense. But, I think he's the kind of guy that is going to excite the fans, but he might drive his coach in the front office crazy.
All right, so those 3 players are spoken for in whatever order. It's going to be 1, 2, 3 with those guys. Then the Bulls at number 4. There's some talent, of course. I don't know, and I'm going to ask your opinion, what fits best for the Bulls. I'll give you a little bit of scouting report. There's the kid who's playing over, and he is a kid. He's only 18. I don't think he's even 19 yet. Denny Avdia, and he's playing over in the for Maccabi
Tel Aviv.
Okay, and he's a talented player. There's no question about it. He's 6'8", 6'9". He's a Ben Simmons kind of player. He's got great court vision. He can run well. He's unselfish. His shooting is streaky at best. I mean, am I describing him properly?
Yeah, what I've seen, and I've seen some tape on him, he is a guy that is a good athlete at 6'9". He runs the floor well, good court awareness, good passer, but his shooting is what people are wondering about. And in today's NBA, as we're seeing in the bubble, if you can't shoot the ball, you can't play. And he did improve the second half of the season when they restarted in Israel. He shot the ball at about a 40% clip on the three-point line. But the thing scouts are worried about, can he make that three-point shot consistently, which would add to his court awareness and his ability to run pick and roll. I think it's a bit of a risk pick, but then in this draft, so many are, and they're going to scout this guy thoroughly. By the time we get to the draft, they'll know everything they need to know, and I'm sure AK has a lot of contacts overseas that can fill in the blanks on some of the questions they might have about the young guy.
All right, we're going to hear from Arturas right after we go over a few more players here. There's also the National Player of the Year from Dayton. That's Obi Toppin. Good size. He's very explosive. He's got tremendous dunking ability, if that turns you on. He runs the floor really well. But he's another power forward.
Yeah, he's a power forward. People have projected, well, maybe he can play some 3. No, he can't. He's like about 6'8", 6'9", and he's got a big body. He's not one of these guys that has great lateral quickness. He can jump very well, as you mentioned. There are a lot of highlights of him jumping over the top of people for dunks. But one of the things I noticed, especially the early season tournament in Maui, he was really working on his three-point stroke to impress NBA scouts that he has that range, and he improved quite a bit from three-point range. He's a really good player, and I think he's going to be a good fit for some teams, but when you look at the number 4 pick, if he's going to be behind Lowry and behind Wendell Carter, assuming he's still here, I don't know if you want to invest a 4 pick on a guy who's going to be a bench guy.
We're all leading up to a trade here, I think. In my mind, there's one other player that's at least a possibility if they hold on to the number 4 pick. Who knows? Maybe there's more than that. And I don't know too much about the kid from Auburn, Isaac Okoro.
Yeah, I watched a lot of him. He is a Jimmy Butler clone. I watched a number of games, and he reminds me, when you watch him, you think that's Jimmy Butler. I mean, he takes the ball strong to the basket. You remember when Jimmy came into the league, he couldn't buy a jumper to save his life.
Sure.
And he worked on that for 2, 3, 4 years to the point where he became a good threat from the three-point line and able to hit that mid-range shot with consistency. So I think that some guys never develop a shot, and maybe he'll be that guy. And if that's the case, then it would be a wasted pick at 4. But when you look at his ability to guard 4 spots along the perimeter, he can guard 1 through 4. Very good athlete, exceptional defender. You look at the one spot that the Bulls don't have long term, and that's small forward. And he 6'6", small forward size. If he develops a jump shot, he's a potential all-star.
Actually, I think they have him listed at 6'8", but you know how all of those scouting reports lie. Okay. Anyway, those are I don't know, maybe there's somebody else on somebody's list, maybe even on your list that you could consider number 4.
The point guard from France, Killian Hayes, a lot of people like. He's a left-hand dominant player who shoots the ball well from the free throw line, but didn't really do a great job from the three-point range. Great at running pick and roll, good at finishing at the basket. He's about 6'4", 6'5", a bigger point guard who's a pass-first guy. Some people feel, I'm not really in that camp, that the Bulls need a point guard to go with Kobe White and Zach LaVine to be a pure facilitator. For me, the problem is if you bring in another guy, you're going to undercut Kobe's minutes and his confidence, and then you're creating a problem that you didn't have before.
All right, I smell a trade here on draft night.
They could very easily move down and try to pick up another number 1.
Yeah, and I'm going to run down some of the trade rumors, and one of them is so ridiculous I can't even begin to laugh at it that much. But let's hear from Arturas Karnisovas. Initially, this was like right after he garnered the number 4 pick, and he was talking to the media, and here he talks about what needs the Bulls have going forward.
I think you address by selecting the best player available. I think especially at the 4. I don't think you address needs at the 4. You get the best talent. So that's what we're going to be looking for. With the highest upside player. So, on October 16th, you'll see who it's going to be.
Yes, we will. And, in the past, obviously, he was part of the Denver draft room, and Denver has done extremely well. They weren't drafting as high as number 4, I don't believe, anywhere. But he's gotten some real diamonds in the rough at 13 and 15. Anyway, he talks about the success that he had while he was out in Denver.
I'll let it always play out, because we're doing a bunch of rankings, and by the time the draft comes, we have our draft board and, a lot of opinions, and then minimize the noise and pick the player that, best available on the board. So that's going to be the strategy. And, there's a bunch of things happen during the draft. You're going to go move up, you're going to move down, who knows? So there's going to be a lot of conversations with other teams, and it's exciting time.
And one last one, Mark, and then I want your thoughts on what he's saying, talking about strategy. Here's basically what his philosophy is going into whatever happens on draft night.
I like to evaluate players live, 5-on-5, which we had a chance this year, the season that was cut short. Then combined and going through a bunch of interviews. We actually did a lot of Zoom interviews so far. We'll see what the NBA is going to come up in terms of virtual combine. That will be a combination of, obviously physicals and testing and, again, video interviews. Just going through the process, it's going to help us to get to last week before the draft when we're going to come up with the consensus. We spend a ton of time with video. We spend a lot of time with interviewing prospect. The consensus is going to arrive, but it's going to be probably more clear with a week to go in the draft.
And Mark, I want your opinions on anything you might have just heard there, but I told Aldo before, when we were playing these cuts before we started the recording, this guy is great at saying a lot and saying nothing at the same time.
Well, we know a lot of executives over the years in Chicago have been good at that. I think that's the number one skill. If you want to go to college or get an internship, the first thing they tell you is don't tell the media anything. Just say a lot of stuff and don't be specific about anything. The one thing that he let slip, which we didn't play in these cuts, is in one of his answers, he mentioned, he was asked about the good fortune of moving up from 7 to 4. He goes, well, that's really important for the franchise. He goes, I wish we would have gotten the top 3, but, getting 4 is important for us in terms of our options in the draft. So he kind of admitted what most people have conceded, that it's a 3-player draft and they've got the 4th pick. But you can do a lot at 4, and there's nothing that it doesn't guarantee that, in this draft, the best player of this draft won't come from beyond the top 3.
Oh,
it could easily come.
100%. And as I'm watching the NBA games, and we'll talk about that in a moment or a little bit later on in this podcast down in the bubble, I mean, Donovan Mitchell scored 50 points in last night's game. He was drafted at number 13. The best player in the NBA right now, the Greek Freak, he was drafted at number 15. So
and the irony, though, is that he was drafted by Denver, where Arturas was, and they traded him to Utah. Oops. So they didn't make all the right decisions along the way.
Anyway, as I said earlier, I smell a trade here come draft night because whoever we talked about in the past over the last few minutes, it's a project. It's an if. I hate ifs. I want sure things. So there's always the trade possibilities. I'm going to throw one by you. You know, I totally, or constantly, I should say, scour the trade rumors, and Hoops Hype is great for that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there was one on the Bleacher Report, and I guess the writer's name is Grant Hughes. I don't know who he is. I'm sure he knows his basketball, but not in this one. So he has the Bulls dealing the number 4 pick, whoever that turns out to be, to Philadelphia. Okay, you know where I'm going with this, for Ben Simmons. But that's not where the trade ends. He's got the Bulls dealing number 4, Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, Kobe White, and the number 4. So you're talking 3 starters, and the number 4 is basically a 4th starter for Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons, there's no question, he's a star player in the NBA. But as we've talked about previous, there are faults in his game.
Yeah, he doesn't shoot it, doesn't want to shoot it, even though we always see the video of him practicing his three-point shots before games. He won't take it in a game, and that's kind of messed things up to the point where Philly got swept out by Boston, and they've got all kinds of organizational chaos right now. You're not going to trade 3 young starting players and the 4th pick in the draft for Ben Simmons. You're just not going to do it. Now, I saw a different version of that trade, and maybe it must have been a different writer, where they suggested LaVine, Markkanen, and the 4 for Al Horford and Ben Simmons.
Okay, well, that's not what this one did. I wouldn't even do that, to be honest with you. I mean, Al Horford, once upon a time, was a really good player, and probably a good team player, probably even great in the locker room as well. But I think his best days are now behind him.
Yeah, he was Joakim Noah's teammate at Florida, so
we're going back.
A lot of mileage on those tires.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. First of all, Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen, you can say, listen, they both have deficiencies in their games as well. But those are the 2 guys that you should be building around and adding. You're not subtracting them from the equation. And Ben Simmons, don't get me wrong, Ben Simmons is an exciting player, and I'd be thrilled to watch him on a game-by-game basis. But he's got deficiencies for a player of his star status, and we've talked about this also. He does not know how to shoot a free throw. And you can bet your bottom dollar that in any close game, they're going to foul him. And he's going to lose you 3 or 4 games in the regular season, and God forbid, even more so in a playoff scenario, if he could never improve his free throw shooting. No offense, I don't want a guy like that on my team.
It's going to be fascinating to see what Philadelphia does in the offseason. The speculation is that Brett Brown will be fired, and after getting swept out by their longtime rivals, the Celtics, I think there's a very good chance he'll be out, even though what's happened at Philadelphia, you certainly can't blame it all on Brett Brown. Usually the easiest thing to do is to fire the coach, and that may impact the Bulls in that Ime Udoka, who is considered one of the top candidates to move up from the assistant ranks, he may just replace Brett Brown in Philly and not go anywhere. So it could impact the Bulls coaching search. I don't think they would be interested in Brett Brown because there's a lot of criticism of him as an in-game coach, and also the fact that his salary demands as a guy with multiple years of experience as an NBA head coach would probably be way too high.
Joel Embiid, to me, between the 2 players, I'm hanging on to if I'm Philadelphia.
Sure.
Okay, and Elton Brand. Listen, is Elton Brand's job status in jeopardy? I mean, he's made what we thought were all good moves, getting Horford, getting Harris, but it hasn't worked out for whatever reason.
Yeah, he gave up a lot to get Jimmy Butler from Minnesota, and then he basically let him walk away. Yeah. I would have kept Butler over Tobias Harris. That'd be an easy decision for me. But for whatever reason, they decided to invest a max deal in Tobias Harris, who, while a very good player, is not a max player. All
right, we're going to get to Casey Johnson in just a second here, but one more thing, and it crossed the wires here earlier. Not really surprised by this. Juwan Howard, his name has been thrown into a lot of rumor list for being a possibility, maybe even here in Chicago. Let's face it, he's a Chicago guy. He's worked really well in the NBA, obviously, as a player and as an assistant coach, and learned under the best down in Miami. Do you think that's a name the Bulls will or should even consider?
You have to wonder if Juwan Howard is really ready to leave Michigan. He arrived in Ann Arbor with a lot of fanfare. Of course, he was part of the Fab Five, his alma mater, and he came there professing his love for the university, and to leave after 1 year, I don't think the timing is right for him. I would guess that he'll probably invest some more time in the program in Michigan. I think Juwan Howard will definitely be an NBA coach at some point. I just don't think this year is the right time for him to jump, because he would have to try to explain that away. And I know coaches change jobs all the time, but with this particular set of circumstances, with all the fanfare upon his arrival at Michigan, I think that would be a tough exit for him.
And they have a great recruiting class coming in there with what already is a pretty deep roster from last year. And, had a pretty decent year last year, at least early on, and then they sort of faltered at the end. So, yes, I agree with you. I think Juwan Howard is ultimately going to be an NBA coach somewhere, but I think he's going to probably be the college coaching, work on the college coaching court for a while to come. Anyway, still to come, and we're going to get to K.C. Johnson in just a moment. K.C. Johnson, he's the best in the business here in Chicago, no question about that, and we'll be back right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandia of the Barroom Network. Want to let you know that on the next Grobstein Schuster Zone show, Mike North is going to join Les and David for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. I don't know how long Mike is going to stay, but it's going to be a wild show with Mike North joining his old two buddies from the Score Sports Radio days, David Schuster and Les Grobstein. Mike North on the Grobstein Schuster Zone.
And welcome back to the Sharpshooters edition. I'm David Schuster. He's Mark Schanowski. And now we're pleased to be joined, and I've said this numerous times, the best in the business covering basketball in the city of Chicago, the longtime Bulls beat reporter. He works for NBC Sports Chicago. You can follow him on Twitter at KCJHoop, the one and only K.C. Johnson. How you doing, K.C.?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. This is so cool you guys are doing this.
Yeah, we just started this a few weeks ago, and we're trying to build a following, and we're having great guests like you. It's going to help us out. So we appreciate you taking some time today. And you've been very active during this whole pandemic period, trying to come up with stuff to write. And then obviously the Bulls are never a dull story. There's something that always seems to be going on. We were thinking for a while that we may have another season of Jim Boylan in the works. And, of course, Arturas Karnisovas decided that he was going to make that change, announced that about 10 days ago. What is on tap for Arturas in terms of his coaching search? I know that he's very deliberate in his process. Do you feel like he's going to stretch this out for months before he names a new guy?
I think I don't have a good feel for that because, Arturas is a tough guy to read in the sense that he keeps things pretty close to the vest. I think if you go by, obviously, the Jim Boylan situation, he's proven that he's a deliberate and thoughtful decision maker and really kind of tunes out the outside noise. So here's how I'd answer that, Mark. Is my sense is he knows exactly what he wants to do and how he wants to go about it, but he's just not going to share that. The list of candidates, or at least a partial list of the candidates, has already made it in various reports, including my own. So I know that he's thorough. So my sense is that he'll talk to several people and use this opportunity to, use that experience to get to know several candidates intimately. But as far as the timeline or when it happens, he's proven that he kind of does things at his own pace.
Yeah, David and I just talked about the latest name that was thrown out there, Juwan Howard, and I concluded that I think it would just be awkward at this point after all the fanfare arriving in Michigan for him to try to leave for an NBA job, even if it wasn't his hometown of Chicago. Do you get the sense that it would be an awkward exit for him to try to bolt Michigan at this point?
Yeah, and he's already, I think, posted something to social media making clear that his commitment is to the University of Michigan. In the past, obviously, because of his long tenureship as a respected NBA assistant, had been, bandied about some other job opportunities. But, just having made that move, I don't think that's somebody that's going to be on the list. I think, like I said, the list is 6 deep by most reports. I'm sure there's a couple other candidates that have not been made public yet. And I'm assuming, going to go through the process and talk to all of them and really get a feel for each candidate and then make his decision based on that.
Hey, Casey, you were so correct when you said Arturas Karnisovas plays things very close to the vest, and Mark and I were sort of kidding. He'll give you 30, 45 seconds of stuff basically saying nothing. So that's where, he's very close to the vest, but he did sort of slip. Mark pointed this out when he was talking about, well, we wish we would have been, or along those lines, in the top 3. So he's almost admitting that this is a 3-player heavy at the top of the draft, and there's even question marks about those 3, and then it sort of slides down after 3, and he's got the 4th pick. What do you think at this juncture, and a lot can change between now and October if it's even then, what do you think he has in mind for that number 4 pick?
First of all, that's a fantastic catch, because I pointed out that exact same thing to a friend of mine when I was talking to them that late that night after the draft lottery. He does not reveal a lot. There is widespread speculation that it's a 3-person draft, and of course the Bulls are on the outside looking in. Now look, 4 is still better than 7, and given that they've dropped in some other years and moved up this year, that's certainly a good thing. And my biggest takeaway from his media availability from draft lottery night is this is a guy who he's very confident in his own skin, and he's very comfortable having gone through this draft process so many times. Maybe not in the lead decision-making role, but certainly as a prominent role in that decision-making process, first with Houston and then more prominently with Denver. And he just didn't seem daunted by really anything that we threw at him. This is going to be a funky draft process with the virtual combine and the scouting process getting cut short because there were no conference tournaments or NCAA tournament. And he just seemed like, you can complain about it or you can look at it as an opportunity. And I look at it as an opportunity. So, again, I think he'll, similar to the coach situation, I'm sure he has an idea of what he wants to do, and he'll go about trying to accomplish that, but go through the process and learn more intel as you go through the process. And, I think this is a guy that's made it pretty clear that he makes decisive decisions on what he's ready. He's already fired 2 pretty prominent names with Gar Forman and Jim Boylan. So if there's somebody that he wants and wants to move up to try to get him, I assume he'll endeavor to try to do that. Now, that said, we all know it takes 2 teams to make a trade, so he would need some help in that. But if that little slip or that admission that I wish it was top 3, if there is somebody that they target in the top 3 they want, I assume he'll explore trying to get up to move up to try to get that person.
And there's also at least the possibility of a trade without even moving up, maybe just moving out that number 4 pick. And there's already rumors out of Philadelphia on the heels of them being eliminated in 4 quick games to Boston that Ben Simmons is not in the future for the 76ers. And of course, some trade rumors have him coming to the Bulls in some kind of combination with either Markkanen, Levine, the number 4 pick, what have you, going elsewhere. I mean, could you at least see the possibility? I'm sure he'll investigate every kind of possibility for getting some kind of player for his roster. Is Ben Simmons at least a possibility in his mind, do you think?
Well, the way I would answer that is, I don't know. It's not like our church is telling me his plans, but what I would say is...
You mean he hasn't?
What I would say is, and you guys know this, these guys are respected these guys have done this before. They haven't done it in this city with this franchise and in these roles, but these guys both have extensive front office experience with different franchises. So these people are well connected throughout the league. They know what's going on throughout the league in terms of trade talk. They're again, Arturas, to me, just in the short time I've started to get to know him, seems like a pretty decisive guy. So if Ben Simmons is somebody he wants, which I don't know the answer to, I 100% know he would explore trying to get him. That's just how this guy operates, and it's how he's operated in his short tenure as Bulls executive vice president. He makes a decision and he acts decisively on it, and he makes that decision on his own frame. I personally think that they're going to use this season more of an evaluation season to get to know the roster better and try to figure out why it has underachieved, especially because obviously if Otto Porter Jr. opts in, as we all expect, they're going to just be working the margins to improve the roster via free agency. And then, we all know that next summer they stand to project to have maximum salary cap space or near maximum salary cap space. And you have another season of Zach LaVine data to decide if you want to extend him or, maybe start moving on from him and figure out a trade market for him. So that's just my sense, but I think we're all figured out how this new front office works because it's, been the first time there's been Bulls front office change in 17 years. So we'll see how it plays out.
One of the things that Arturas said a number of times on Thursday night was the fact that picking as high as they are at 4, you can throw positional needs out the window, and you got to get the guy with the highest upside, the best talent that's available on the board. Back when we were briefly colleagues at NBC Sports Chicago before I became a victim of the COVID cutbacks, I was doing a lot of mock drafts, and so I did a lot of work on this draft. And one of the guys that I really like a lot, maybe not at 4, but maybe at 4 as well, is Isaac Okoro, the small forward from Auburn, who reminds me, Casey, almost as a dead ringer of Jimmy Butler. You remember Jimmy Butler at Marquette? He was playing out of position at power forward. He couldn't shoot to save his life, and he couldn't shoot well his first 2 years in the NBA, but developed into an all-star player. I'm not saying Okoro was going to have the work ethic or develop the jump shot enough to be Jimmy Butler, but he is a pretty good poor man's Jimmy, let's put it that way. Would you reach for a guy like that at 4, or you think that maybe that's a little bit rich for his blood?
No, I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder with this draft, right? Because, that's what's so unpredictable about this draft. After you get past probably that consensus top 3, some team might see one guy at 4 that another guy sees at 8, and vice versa. So I agree with the Jimmy Butler comp on Okoro. And the larger theme that you started the question with, Mark, is, and this is what I like about, a little bit of Arturas' public comments, and also just if you look at his past history, is he's not focused on duplication. When you've got a young roster, as we all know, you've just got to accumulate as much talent and as much assets as you can and figure out the fit later. So if they get to draft night, they stay at 4, and Wiseman, Ball, and Edwards are off the board, and they've got Okoro, first in their board at 4, you take him and you figure out fit later. And the example that I keep pointing to is one that involves the Bulls. When Arturas was working for the Nuggets, they traded for Nurkic, the same year they got Jokic, and they figured out the fit later. And, Jokic obviously is a perennial All-NBA guy now, and Nurkic is obviously doing very well with Portland, but they flipped that and figured out the fit later. That's just, I think, how good teams operate. Is you can't get hung up on, okay, we've got a hole here, but this player's better, let's pass that player to fill the hole. When you're young and in a rebuilding situation, I think that's a mistake, and it certainly sounds like one that Arturas and Mark Eversley will not make.
Yeah, Dave and I talked about the fact that Obi Toppin's probably going to be staring at him at 4, and he's a 6'8", 6'9" power forward. I mean, really, that is his spot. He's a power forward. You got questions about Lauri Markkanen in terms of extending, off his rookie deal, which should probably be put off for a year. But would you take Toppin at 4? I guess if he's the best player on Arturas' board, they would. But you look at the duplication of talent there, and you wonder, do you want to invest a 4 pick in a guy who's going to be playing behind someone like Lauri Markkanen?
Yeah, I mean, that would almost be the ultimate test of that theory, because you could also make the case that at some point Wendell might be a 4, right? So, I mean, then you're talking about 3 guys at that position that you've got to figure out. I mean, I know Wendell projects to be the center right now, but let's say, I mean, we're obviously deep into speculation here, but let's say at some point the Markkanen stuff doesn't get figured out and they decide to try to move off of him and move Wendell to 4, right? So then you've got a hole at 5 now. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. I'm just going to take Arturas at his word for now, and he has said doesn't get hung up on duplication and more just looks at best talent and not positional needs. So if Toppin is on their board and the other at 4 and the other 3 picks are gone, that's who he's going to take. I mean, that's what he has said publicly. I've taken the approach as you get to know a new regime is to take guys at face value, and that's certainly how the Jim Boylan situation played out, right? I mean, he kept saying this is a difficult decision and I'm going to take my time to get to know him before making the decision, and that's what he did while people were screaming, the entire time. And then look, people have even made fun of, and I know we're off of Toppin here, but people have even made fun of, Arturas' publicly stated reason that it was the last day of the regular season, that's when he decided to fire Jim Boylan. But look, there is logic behind that decision. You may not agree with it, but it certainly, again, it points to a guy, a decision maker that has a plan, has logic behind the plan, and then acts upon it. So I would apply that same logic to the draft. If Toppin is there at 4 and he's number 1 on the board, that's who they're going to take. That's the way I'm approaching this new regime, is taking them at their word at face value.
Hey, Casey, back to Boylen just for a second, and I want to preface my upcoming question by saying, for the most part, players just play for whoever the coach is. I mean, they may have their thoughts, but they rarely echo them, if you will. With the Bulls, that wasn't always the case. I mean, whenever we would ask Zach LaVine, he would roll his eyes, and he would snicker a little bit on the bench during those late timeouts. What other players? I mean, Denzel Valentine, he was pretty blatant about his thoughts. Lauri Markkanen at times criticized the offense, and then even Thomas Satoransky, in one of the interviews overseas, sort of questioned a lot of things. So, again, they play for their coach, but do you think in retrospect or in general, do you think they're relieved that they will have a new coach going forward, whoever that may be?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty widespread. I'll say this, though. I'm glad you prefaced that question with that first part of it, because, look, you can go around the NBA. Nobody likes their boss, right? I mean, I'm being lighthearted and facetious here, but everybody complains about their boss, right? So, I mean, obviously some coaches are more respected than others, and, most guys like Spoelstra or Popovich or Carlisle that have the pedigree, probably are universally, maybe not universally respected, but widely respected. But, I've covered so many coaches that you can always find a roster where a guy doesn't like their coach at some point. Look, at the Tom Thibodeau's tenure, there were players that were grumbling about his tactics, and that all that dude did was win. Now, I'm not saying that there wasn't an issue here, because it was pretty widespread. I do think that the player feedback component to the decision, though, was a little bit overstated. We all know Zach. He's just a roll with the punches pleaser. Did he have issues with his usage at times? He said those publicly. But if Jim Boylen was the coach at the start of next year again, Zach would have been all right. Here we go. I mean, I trust Arturas and Eversley. So Zach's kind of a go with the flow guy, but when you've got a new managerial regime, we all knew at some point there was going to be a new coach. It was just a matter of when, and it just kind of continues the positive momentum that's around this organization. And I'm sure these players will know that Arturas and Mark hire somebody that has their best interest in mind. And one more thing about Boylen and Zach that I want to emphasize is, Boylen actually had done a really good job of, after the initial kind of bumpy period when he first took over for Fred, of kind of earning and winning over Zach and Lowry again. People forget now, because last year was such a train wreck, that they entered last season, and I'm talking about everybody now, really in a really good spot. There was a lot of optimism coming out of training camp. You guys remember the talk of the September workouts and the fake wrestling championship belt for the gimmicky stuff that people now are obviously rolling their eyes at. But guys were into that stuff, and it was like a fun vibe, and there was optimism coming out of training camp. This, to me, is why you can never overstate the significance of that Miami game. That was a death blow for the LaVine-Boylen relationship. When he pulled him out, and singled him out for those 3 egregious defensive mistakes. I remember doing a hit. It was funny because they came to me, Stacey and Neil came to me on the broadcast just for like a regularly timed hit, like right after Jack got taken out. And I remember saying live on the air, this is a significant news story, gentlemen, because the ramifications of that were large. And then obviously everybody got in a better mood the next night when Zach went bonkers from 3 and had that incredible game in Charlotte. But that was a pretty big deal in the Zach Jim relationship. That's just not typically how lead players are treated. And from Jim's perspective, playing both sides of this, he would say that's consistent with what he tried to do with Zach, and that's challenge him to become a better two-way player and a more complete player. But it was just you guys know, I mean, that just stuff doesn't happen very often in the NBA, and it was something that was certainly that stood out and why we wrote about it so much.
Yeah, there's no question. This is a players' league, certainly a star players' league, and if you can't get along with the top players on your roster, you're going to have some issues. Getting back to the coaching search, we all love the joys of Twitter and the great mentions we get from the fan base out there. But I had this innocent comment where I mentioned that with the possibility of Brett Brown maybe getting fired in Philadelphia, that could impact the Bulls coaching search because they may elevate Ime Udoka, who's considered a candidate in a number of situations, to the head coaching position. And it's just as a throwaway line, I said, I don't know if the Bulls would want to interview Brett Brown, and I got attacked by all corners. Even my good friend Stacey King sent me a GIF with a guy rolling his eyes like, what are you thinking? But, Brett Brown is one of these guys. He went through the process in Philadelphia when it really was, with Sam Hinkie and trading all their assets out for future draft picks. He had to endure 4 years of some of the worst basketball in the history of the NBA. And I'm not here to defend Brett Brown, but when you look at the Bulls coaching search, I would think guys like Brett Brown and Alvin Gentry and even Ty Lue, those guys are priced out of even being a candidate. Casey, don't you think that they're probably looking at a assistant coach, because their history has been, even though this is a new front office, they don't really hire guys with the previous NBA head coaching experience?
I mean, again, I don't know the answer to that, Mark, because I don't know this front office that well. Of the initial candidate list, you're probably on the right track because there's only one guy with previous head coaching experience in Kenny Atkinson. But like I said, there might be unknown candidates that candidates that come out as we move through this process. As far as Ty Lue, I keep hearing, he's got a good chance in New Orleans. That's kind of the buzz around the league. So that's something that I would keep an eye on there. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how the Bulls have historically worked in the past. But the flip side of that is they have not hired a coach with previous head coaching experience in Scott Skiles in 2004. Right. So isn't it maybe time to opt for experience? I mean,
but you think salary is going to be a factor here, Casey? Because they got to pay Boylan for 2 years, and we've got all the lost revenue from the pandemic. I just can't see them going into the $4 or $5 million a year coaching range.
Well, I agree with that, but I think those days in general in the NBA are going to be fading out, Mark. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And really, I mean, what candidates are we talking about that would command that? I mean, you mentioned Brett Brown,
Jason Kidd.
Gentry. Yeah, but I haven't heard any of those names linked to the Bulls yet. But I guess I'm kind of all over the place with this answer. Here's the only thing I would say about money. I know what Jerry Reinsdorf said to USA Today about finances, and I recognize that they have no income coming in. But I think the money component has been a little bit overstated. I mean, Arturas didn't come cheaply. They've eaten 2 contracts in Gar and Jim. They've made 3 hires in Eversley, Polk, and Connolly. I know there are plans to build out the player development department. They're probably going to have to eat some assistant coaching salaries. I'm guessing here. I don't know for sure. So, the Reinsdorfs have given Arturas a lot of latitude there. I think that if he comes to them and says, this is the guy we need to get, this is still the honeymoon period for this partnership. So my sense is they're going to let him get what he wants. Look, ownership, we all know, would have been fine with Jim Boylan coming back, and they signed off on his firing. So I think the money thing is, I think the Reinsdorfs will let Arturas do what he wants to do in terms of the head coaching situation. I just don't think there are many $4 or $5 million candidates that I've heard that to this point linked to the job. So I think it's kind of a moot point.
Hey, Casey, quick answer to this question. I mean, who knows what's going on in the world right now? I mean, it's so strange, obviously. When do you think the NBA would like to start the next season? I mean, it could be December 1st. It could be Martin Luther King Day. Who the heck knows? What's their best case scenario, do you think?
Well, Adam Silver's already said it. I mean, he said to Rachel Nichols, and it's certainly been consistent with what I've been hearing and I've been writing, is that, the majority, it's, first of all, science is going to drive the decision, number one. And number two, it's clear they're going to try to find as large of a window where fans are going to be allowed in buildings. So what that date is, I don't know the answer to. But look, this is, as we all know, this is unprecedented financial territory for a league that is just so, contingent on gate revenue. So the whole financial model would be in peril if at some point fans aren't back in the arenas. Obviously we don't know where this virus is going to go, but I do know that maximizing the window where fans would be allowed in buildings will certainly play or at least be on the table for discussions for when the start date is. That is 100% for sure.
Yeah, Casey, I got one last one for you. Just want to remind all our listeners to make sure that you follow Casey Johnson and Rob Schaefer at NBCSportsChicago.com. They're doing a great job of covering the Bulls and all the developments around the league. I read your article this morning, and you mentioned that the league has a plan for the Delete 8 teams, as they were dubbed. Are there specific dates on that now?
Yeah, the group workouts, they start quarantining on the 14th, and then the group workouts are the 21st to the 6th, September 21st to the 6th. And it's all obviously voluntary, so we'll see what kind of buy-in the Bulls get. I mean, they've had a pretty decent collection of players even for their off-season individual workouts. So I would think, particularly if you're trying to impress the new regime or make an impression on a new regime, you'd get pretty significant buy-in from players. But, there's also mitigating factors like impending free agents are probably going to skip it. Zach works out so much. I don't know if he'd come in from Seattle, but he's also an organizational pleaser, so he very well may come in. But, it's September 14th to 21st is continuing the individual workout phase and starting to quarantine. And then the 21st to the 6th is the group training activities in each team's respective market.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but will the media be allowed to any of this, or is that
the answer?
Yeah, I know the answer. Or is that terrible four-letter word Zoom going to be used to talk to anybody?
Well, we'll be zooming.
God, I hate that word.
And there's no plans to have them play other teams in during this period, is there?
No, that was not agreed to by the Players Association. And, Michelle Roberts made it pretty clear that it was going to have to follow, similar protocols to Orlando. So it's not necessarily a bubble, but, there will be, a plan for the players that choose to do. I mean, they'll be going from the Advocate Center to, I believe, a group living arrangement. I think that's still being figured out from a Bulls perspective, but that's my understanding is that, they'll be busing. So, I mean, this is going to be, you've got to be kind of in campus, in quotes, like the Disney World campus. You're going to be kind of in the same spot from the 21st to the 6th.
He's the best in the business. He's Casey Johnson from NBC Sports Chicago. You can follow him like I and Mark both do on Twitter at KCJHoop. And Casey, we greatly appreciate your time today.
Yeah, he's busy. He's got two young boys who are very busy in athletic events. Got any stories to tell us about that? How the summer's gone for the boys?
We are salvaging a youth baseball
There you go. That a boy.
It got moved from April to July. Instead of April to July, it started just in August, and we're going to go through October as long as Chicago stays in the phase that it is. So that's been nice to get a little sense of normalcy.
Are you coaching?
I am assistant coach
there
for
you
my
go.
younger kids.
He throws his hat on the ground. He kicks dirt on the bases. Yeah.
I spit tobacco juice into my mask. I got it all going.
That's a lovely visual.
Yeah. If you ever want to make fun of me, just come see me at Wells Park someday, coaching first base, keeping score in an old school book while also checking things on my phone and wearing a mask. It's a great look, man.
Hey, Casey, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Casey.
Thanks for having me, guys. You guys are awesome.
All right, thanks.
What's the best way to not miss a single episode of Sharpshooters with Schanowski and Schuster? Well, subscribe to the Bears Ballroom Radio Network wherever you get your podcasts. Just go to Google and search Bears Ballroom Radio Network, and you'll see a list of delivery channels like iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and just subscribe to Bears Ballroom Radio Network. You won't miss a single episode.
And welcome back to Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster. He's Mark Schanowski. And once again, we thank Casey Johnson of NBC Sports Chicago for joining us. And as always, great stuff from Casey.
Yeah, it's very hard to figure out what's going to happen next because it is a new regime and we're getting to know our tourists a little bit. And he has dropped a couple of hints along the way, as we mentioned about the fact that he did concede that this is there's an elite class of 3 players at the top of the draft. And maybe he will surprise us in the coaching search. There are guys out there. David Yeager's a guy that I liked, who did some good work in Memphis and Sacramento. I didn't bring that up with KC, but I don't think he would be a guy that'd be out of their price range. He could be a name they could consider.
All right, let's take a look at what's continuing to go on in the bubble down in Orlando. And listen, I'm so thankful that there's pro basketball because it's still, for me, my favorite sport, and I think it is for you as well, Mark. And for the most part, not 100%, but for the most part, things are going according to form. Although the top seeds in both the East and the West, the Lakers and Milwaukee, they've had their struggles. And I'm wondering, in retrospect, how they approached those last 8 or 9 games that they had to play leading into the playoffs. They sort of didn't go at it full speed, and they were resting players. Do you think that sort of caught up with them as they started these playoff series?
Well, the one overriding thing that I've seen during both the seeding games and now the early playoff games is no one's playing any defense.
No,
and the players have talked about the fact that the atmosphere at the arenas in Orlando, with the way that they're set up, they have great shooting backgrounds, and we've seen offense. The numbers have been off the charts, guys. Donovan Mitchell's had 2 50-point games. We're seeing Luka Doncic do some amazing things for the Dallas Mavericks, and it's just been a shootout in almost every game. It's not like some team is locking somebody down and that's how they're winning. They're winning just simply by outscoring teams. It's an exciting style of basketball for people like us who play a lot of pickup basketball in our lives. It kind of reminds you of, hey, I'll let you score, you let me score, and it's kind of been that way during the NBA. And I think for some of the purists, it might be something that they don't like as much. But after not having basketball for 4 months, I'm happy for whatever we can get, and it has been very competitive. Guys are playing hard. It's just we haven't seen the lockdown defense you normally associate with playoff basketball.
No, but I'm finally happy. In last night's game, we're recording this on Monday. In last night's game, there was some, I don't know, there's been some bad vibes. When we are in playoff basketball, so guys are getting a little bit heated. And let's, for instance, talk about the Utah, and we'll talk about all the games in just a second, but the Denver-Utah game last night, and Donovan Mitchell was just torching Denver. And then I think he went to the basket and he was fouled by Paul Millsap. And Millsap gave him this really dirty look, like, I blocked your shot.
Yeah.
That's all right. Mitchell scored the next 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, he
down
took
the
him
court.
out on the perimeter and knocked a 3 right over the top of him, and he kind of taunted him on the way back to the bench. That was good to see. That was good competitive basketball. Yeah. Millsap did block his shot, but it's like, you see so many of these pick and rolls where the big switches out to the guard and they're just helpless.
Yeah, they just walk right by him. Anyway, let's take a look at the 2 respective conferences. I'll give you my thoughts and then you add to that. In the East, Milwaukee's going to win this series against Orlando, but they did drop the first game and they were exposed.
They looked terrible in doing so.
Yeah, their defense, which was a staple, especially for
number
that coach.
one in the league. But
it's been exposed here. They talk about no defense. They'll ultimately win that series. Toronto's been the most impressive team. I mean, they're basically playing a junior varsity team in my estimation in Brooklyn, but that was 4-0. Toronto's bench in last night's elimination game, 100 points from their bench. I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Norman Powell has all of a sudden come on to be a real impact player. People talk about 6th man of the year, and you always go to the Lou Williams types, but Norman Powell had a great year. He started too many games to qualify for that award, but he has put up some big numbers, and Serge Ibaka had a big game. He's a guy that came into the league. People were really excited about his potential, and then he kind of plateaued out, but he's found his role in Toronto, and in my mind, Toronto is clearly the team to beat in the East right now. All
right, Boston walked over Philadelphia. We've talked about Philadelphia's problems, and they're going to just have a total shakeup, in a lot of ways in the offseason. And Miami is, as we speak right now, is up 3-0. They'll probably eliminate Indiana later today. Miami is just a well-coached, cohesive team.
And how about Duncan Robinson coming out of nowhere? Here's a guy who started out, I think, at a Division II school, and then he finished up at Michigan, and he was coming off the bench as a senior at Michigan, and my son Eric went to Michigan, so I watched a lot of their games, and Duncan Robinson was always an enigma to me. I always thought, a guy that shoots the ball like that, why isn't he more effective? And maybe it was usage, and there were other players that were overshadowing him there. But, Miami basically found him. He was undrafted, of course, and he played well in Summer League. And now he's one of the best, most lethal three-point shooters in the league. And I mentioned on our last show last week that I think Miami will beat Milwaukee in the second round. I feel that even more strongly now because Milwaukee's defense, even though it's ranked number 1 in the league, their whole philosophy is we're going to pack the paint. We're not going to give anything inside. We'll dare you to make three-pointers. You do that to Miami with Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero and Dragic, and even Jimmy can knock some down. they're gonna give Milwaukee all they can handle, and I think ultimately the Heat will beat the Bucks.
The second round series in the East will be very competitive and interesting. I mean, Toronto and Boston, that'll be a very interesting series.
Should be good, yeah.
Those two teams are both playing, and they're both coming off 4-game sweeps, so they'll be well rested going into that series, and they're both very well coached.
And Gordon
teams.
Hayward is out. That's one thing that's going to hurt
Yes.
Boston in terms of their depth, but they're getting such good play right now. Jason Tatum, we talk about guys emerging in the bubble. He's another guy that has really cemented his status as an elite talent in the game. And Jaylen Brown, who was criticized a lot early on in his career for, I think he was the 3rd or 4th pick in the draft, and people are saying, why doesn't he put up better numbers? He's playing like the guy that a lot of draft experts had talked about coming out of Cal, and Kemba Walker looks healthy again. So that is a dangerous team as well.
And then there's out west where there's less than no defense being played in those games. I mean, the Lakers ultimately will beat Portland. You know, we talked, and thank God they
Kendall
will, because oh my God, we would never have heard Kendall Gill. He would have given it to us for the rest of both our lifetimes.
Yeah, he picked Portland to win the championship last year, in case you missed last week's episode.
Yeah, he'll blame it that that Lillard hurt his hand and McCollum's got the broken
Fractured
bone in his back.
And
Yada
now
yada
Zach
yada.
Collins is out. Yeah.
I mean, Portland was not going to win this series. Sorry, even if they were at full strength.
Well, they almost won Game 3 too. They led
did.
at halftime.
They did, but then they were wiped out.
I give them a ton of credit for hanging in against the superior, talented team.
And they played really hard in those last 8 or 9 games to get into the playoffs.
They were from the moment they arrived in Orlando, every game for them was a playoff.
All right, are you surprised by the Clippers in Dallas? And we haven't even talked about Luka Doncic. I mean, what he did in last night's game: 43 points, 17 rebounds, 13 assists, hits the game-winning 3. I mean, he is already definitely a top 5 player in the league. It's unbelievable.
A guy who's, 20, 21 years old, for him to be able to just want the ball in all key situations. I mentioned on Twitter the fact that once he got the ball in the last possession, you knew that he was going to take the shot, and that's what the great players do. Never any doubt that Michael Jordan wanted the ball in his hands to take the last shot, and I'm not comparing Luka to Michael, but you can see even at this young age, he is a guy who wants the pressure on his shoulders. When he went down in Game 3, I didn't know if he was going to be able to play in Game 4. I mean, he rolled that ankle pretty good. He was in a lot of pain, and you could see even mostly more in the first half than the second, he was struggling in terms of trying to get up and down the court, and sometimes he would not go after a loose ball, or he wouldn't take a drive to the basket because he didn't want to put too much stress on that ankle. But yet when it was winning time, he took all the big shots. He led his team. I mean, it was remarkable what he did in that game.
Almost a one-man job because, Porzingis, was not available.
Right.
And listen, the Clippers, I think, were your pick to win it all, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think they'll still win this series because I think Dallas, has got too many injuries to get over the hump here, is my guess. But I said this earlier, Dallas is a team on the rise, specifically because of him. Porzingis certainly helps out. If they add more talent to that roster, they're going to be really good. It was also interesting to see Doc Rivers, after last night's game, call his team emotionally weak.
Right.
That's a real insult from a guy like that.
And people are wondering what's wrong with Paul George. He's been missing in action in this playoff series, shot the ball extremely poorly.
Yeah.
People are wondering whether he's having issues with his shoulders again, but I think it's just a question of he's just in a slump at a bad time, and they're going to have to really dig down deep to win this series. They had some issues with Montrezl Harrell and then the Lou Williams situation where guys left the bubble and came back, and Harrell, you can see, is not the same player he was during the regular season. They're going to have to try to get it together, and if they can survive this series, maybe that would be something that will spring them forward, but they're not going to get Luka Doncic out of there easily.
I am surprised by what's going on in Denver and Utah. I give Utah a lot of credit. There's another well-coached team, and Donovan Mitchell is just playing off the charts here. Like you said, he's had 2 50-point games in the bubble so far. He was incredible last night's game. I thought Denver, the way they finished the quote-unquote regular season, would carry that momentum in, and especially with Mike Conley missing from Utah's lineup the first couple of games. I thought Denver was going to easily win this series, so I'm surprised by this one.
Yeah, their coach Mike Malone was very critical of them after they got blown out in Game 3. They played a much more competitive game last night before they wound up losing that one in a close game. But you have to remember that the Nuggets have been without 2 starters, in Gary Harris and Will Barton. They haven't played at all since the restart. So even though they were able to cover that up, and Michael Porter Jr., the guy that a lot of Bulls fans wish was in a Bulls uniform, he got off to such a great start, but now in the playoff games he's not played as well. So they're a team that's a bit of an enigma, but I think the injuries, the loss of 2 starters have hurt them. But Utah, they lost Bogdanovich, who was a 20-point-a-game scorer for them, so you can't really make excuses that that's the only reason why that they're winning this series.
And then there's Houston, Oklahoma City. This is almost like the forgotten series in my mind. I mean, Houston's going to win this series. I'm not a fan, I've said this numerous times, of James Harden's game, even though he's incredibly talented, and I just don't like the style of play that they play. Ultimately, who would they play if they moved on? Okay, I still have the Lakers winning it all. I just do. I know they have deficiencies. Their bench is not that good overall. I still got to give Dwight Howard some credit. I mean, he's rebounding and actually playing some defense.
They're going to get Rondo back, who should be useful as the rounds go.
Yeah, and I just think LeBron James is on a mission, if you will. So that's still my pick to win it all. But
I think
I'm
the champion
it.
comes out of the West. It's just a question of whether it's going to be the Lakers or the Clippers. I think Toronto ultimately will come out of the East, and we'll see how it goes. But there is the potential for some upsets along the way because of the fact, as I mentioned, it's kind of a shooter's paradise. Whoever's shooting the ball well is going to win, and nobody seems to really want to lock down defensively.
And Nick Nurse, who was named the coach of the year,
deserved.
Did you see how he was? That
was great
on TV
fantastic.
By TNT.
His high school
coach. I mean, honestly, you look for the good moments in sports. That was definitely a good moment.
Yeah, for a guy who worked his way up, coaching overseas, coaching in the G League, now to come to Toronto and win a championship and then be the coach of the year. Congratulations to Nick Nurse. He seems like a real class act.
Yes, he does. And speaking of class acts, so are you, Mark, of course. And we'll end on that cheerful note, and we'll look forward to next week. Don't know who we're going to have as a special guest, but listen, the way we're batting 1,000 right now, I can promise you it'll be somebody good. Talk to you next week, Mark.
We're going to enjoy the rest of the playoffs. Hopefully we get some excitement along the way, and we'll see if somebody wants to play defense by next week.
Doubtful. Take care, everybody.
So long.